Pan-African Review is a platform that challenges assumptions about Africa and a space for introspective perspectives on matters of concern to Africans. Hello everyone and welcome to the Pan-African Review. My name is Mahatma Ulimwengu, and for you today we have a very special guest. Her name is Dr. Chika Esiobu. She's a multifaceted professional encompassing roles as a researcher, non-fiction and fiction writer, college professor and public intellectual. She earned her PhD in African Studies from Howard University over in Washington, D.C., where her academic journey began to focus on the underappreciated yet pivotal role of indigenous knowledge in the global discourse on progress. Dr. Esiobu authored the acclaimed book Indigenous Knowledge in Education in Africa, but today we will be discussing her article in the Pan-African Review titled Renaming the Ghetto Kids as Decolonization. She states here, the labeling of beautiful, talented, hardworking, pleasant children with such a bright future as ghetto kids lies at the heart of the lies that Africa has been fed and now believes about itself. Fascinating stuff. So we'll be right back with her and what she has to say about this. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoy. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, send this to your friends or family members who might be interested. And yeah, let's get to it. Thank you very much for joining us. It's great to finally meet you. But obviously, you along with the rest of the world were captivated by the Ghetto Kids performance. I remember I was a big fan of Britain's Got Talent, America's Got Talent, all those shows a while back, but I stopped watching it. But this Ghetto Kids, it went really, really viral. And what was your first impression in watching the performances? Did you have this article that you wrote for the Pan-African Review ready to go, or were you initially first impressed?
Okay. Thank you for the question, Mahatma. Let me think back to it was actually my daughter who introduced me to watching the Ghetto Kids performance.
Okay.
And I think I'm not sure what my my feelings were, except I was just excited to see my daughter. She's 7, so interested in an African music group, right? And that kind of got me interested in watching them. And of course, the liveliness that they brought to the stage just took me back to the energy we had as kids back in Africa, and which a lot of African kids still have today, who are exposed to that kind of community living. But the name didn't sit well with me at all.
Okay, so from the jump, you were immediately unnerved by it.
Absolutely. I was like, but why the Ghetto Kids? This is a superlative talent on display. This is so much work gone into producing these kids. Why the name Ghetto Kids? So I think it took me about 3 months of not being happy with that name before I wrote the article. But I kept saying I need to unburden.
Yeah, I understand what you mean. That's like a passion project, you were formulating your opinions. So on that note, okay, so let's discuss the article itself. From a Pan-African perspective, what is the main contention in using names such as Ghetto Kids to describe talented African youth? Could you elaborate for anyone in the audience who hasn't gotten the opportunity to read your article?
I think in the article, I asked questions around the meaning of ghetto as far as African culture is concerned. Any person in any part of the world can pick up any name to sell their brand, but we're talking of kids here, first of all. I would not write that if it was an adult group, with that name. I'll be like, that's their choice. But we're talking of children who depend on us adults to guide them, guide their thinking as much as possible, guide their, mold their mindset and their worldview. It bothered me that the name Ghetto will be used to describe them, and I will proudly bear that name. If you look at the dictionary meaning, it's not even used anymore in the United States where the name originated, because the name means very badly behaved kids from the worst part of town, kids that no one wants to associate with, no one wants to be identified with. It's not even used any longer, even to classify the most badly behaved kids in the United States that who come from the most economically disadvantaged region. So why would the name be used to label African kids? And I asked questions around if that name was part of the draw, part of the captivation for the Western audience who watched the kids perform.
Yeah, you wrote here, Ghetto Kids, generally poor behaved children who are difficult to manage in a classroom. You say the word is liberally used about 4 decades ago, but it's no longer in use. And bestowing such a name to Uganda's superlative youth dancing team must be oblivious to the effects of such a negative name on the psychology of young children. Now, this is my favorite thing to do, is to play devil's advocate. Would you be willing to give the benefit of the doubt to the naming of the group and contemplate the possibility that its objective was to remove the bad connotations associated with the word ghetto by showing that talent is present everywhere, regardless of socioeconomic background of candidates? So it's showing that you can be a ghetto kid and still rise to this level.
I think that was the main conviction of the bestower of that name. It was done with the purest of motives, the purest of intentions. But ignorance is not an excuse for the implication of our action. So that decision was taken from a beautiful place, and I use the word beautiful in a quote unquote, of trying to show that kids can come from such a, I don't want to use the word, from an economically disadvantaged background and still, but let's start by asking questions. Since when did we begin to think that talent would only lie within rich, economically advantaged communities? When did we start thinking like that? As a culture, as a people, when did we start to delineate and ascribe greatness and talent to those who only have access to material possessions?
Yeah,
I think that's where we have to start to retrace our steps.
Yeah, I think. That's a good point.
Please.
No. Sorry, I was just sorry. Carry on. I don't mean to interrupt. That's a very good point.
In a world that has become so capitalist, ultra capitalist inclined, there is need to ask these hard questions in order to get us back to our core and to who we are. A human being is a human being and has capabilities of any other human being in any part of the world, despite whatever trappings of wealth might be around the person. So That's what we want to get clear. That's where we want to get back to. That place where we see human beings and we don't see money. We don't see possessions. We just know that we are human for being human, and any human being is capable of anything.
Yeah.
If we come from that, yes, if we come from that place, then we don't have to prove anything. And that's one thing. We keep trying to prove something because someone gave a label, of that, in some other societies, poor kids are disrespected, poor kids are, are seen to not be up to any good. We know that's not the case in Africa. At least, for in the past 30 years, things are changing rapidly today. We know that with privatization of education and all the sad implications that it has brought to the African child. But we know that culturally, the Ubuntu philosophy does not discriminate, does not look down on any human being because of the person's economic situation.
Yeah, certainly. I think from just my basic rudimentary research into some of your works, like I watched, I didn't quite finish it, your TED Talk, how Africa can use its traditional knowledge to make progress. I think you speak on something to the very like root cause when you're talking about A is for Apple, for instance. We need to find a way to get to these African kids where they are instead of trying to adopt or adapt, what they might see on TV or social media influences. So, like you stated in your article too, that Africa is running the risk of abandoning emphasis on character, personality, and community commitment. Could you please just elucidate a bit further on that? Because, like, when did you first start noticing the shift, or has it been ever present throughout your lifetime?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for a long time I lived in denial of the fact that, oh, it's Africa, we have our culture. I live in this frozen place. Like I know a lot of people, a lot of Africans also who are in the diaspora kind of just don't realize how things are changing in Africa, even though we visit briefly. But some years back, I really had to tell myself that based on what I can see in the continent, there is a fast shift. And of course, the social media age magnified that, where we begin to see influencers who are not necessarily uh, people of, not necessarily known for having great character. We find influencers who are who people gravitate towards because of the wealth they display on social media. Yes. Or other things that they display that we do not really identify with character. And we see so many things. We see policies that are aimed at more of empowering citizens economically and less at building, this moral standard, social community, for instance, among citizens, just because that's what has been sold to the continent. Yeah. Okay, we see these so-called development agencies and aid organizations coming in and just focusing attention on economic benefits. And we are gradually, if we are not careful, losing sight of the emphasis that we just took for granted, that communities are built by people of character and not by money. Okay.
Right.
Yes. So we definitely have to step back. Even the Western world, the global north that we saw many African countries are trying so hard to be like, were built on character. Okay. Years before ultra capitalism took over and it became such the kind of economies they are today. But it was really, there was a lot of emphasis on character and nation building and selfless service, sacrifice for the nation across these countries, which today we need to reintroduce, back to African leaders and people who are interested in taking up leadership positions across the continent.
Yeah, I was about to ask, do you think this is just in keeping with global trends? Because obviously, I think in the past decade, at least, I've been alive for 2.5 decades, but the past decade, you could see a crazy, insurmountable, it seems, shift into very materialistic positions with the advent of social media. Instagram, everyone wants to be seen living a certain lifestyle. Now you got TikTok, where everyone is just addicted on their phones. Do you think Africans are uniquely vulnerable to such trends? Because first of all, we do lack the material benefits that the global West has. So if we become attached to these materialistic things and abandon our communities, are we like uniquely vulnerable to the vices that come with that?
I believe I think so. And the very recent report on the suicide rates across the world placed quite a few African countries among the top 10. This is unprecedented,
Right.
among the top 10 countries that are prone to suicide. And we see that there is a lot of discontent, amongst people when they go on social media and see all this wealth and they look at their own lives and they seem to be lacking in such material benefits. So we begin to see resentment build up, self-hatred, just name all the ills that come with that kind of lifestyle.
Yes.
And that's what we see. And you use the word insurmountable.
I feel it.
Which is that's what it looks like, right?
I've been traumatized too. Just I'm observing. So yeah. So I take your point. Yes.
I believe education can do a lot, can undo rather a lot of what has been done in any area, in any aspect, in any sector of human existence. I believe in education. I mean, formal education, informal education, non-formal education, like this conversation we're having when people listen to it. I am a firm believer that education, and even, just using any platform available, religious platforms, social platforms, government platforms, whatever platform available to try and educate the population. It's a war against the mind of the African. And if we do not fight back with knowledge and awareness of what is going on, then we lose.
Yeah.
But if Africans get to understand that there is a battle for the mind and control of the mind of the African, and it's not for the benefit of, the African, the continent, then we start to use knowledge to fight that onslaught. And hopefully at some point, we'll be able to build the kind of communities we wish to build across the continent.
Okay, yeah, that's very interesting. Now let's refer back to the article. I want to use this as the last sort of line of questioning. I'm going to quote you here. This is from the first paragraph. I'm just going to read this and then we'll take it from there. So you write here, quote, "We look at the negative consequences," obviously referring to Ghetto Kids, Ghetto Kids, the dance group. "We look at the negative consequences of this sort of narrative on the individual psyche, as well as on the collective social psychology of Africans who embrace this poverty mindset. We also highlight the effect of the Ghetto Kids narrative on the global North, which is the enduring perception of Africans as subpar, as people who are nothing but poor in character, poor in intelligence, poor in finances, and poor in any indices that capacitates the human person." So what could be the repercussions of this poverty mindset that you denounce in your article on the political and economic fronts, for instance?
It's so vast, Mahatma. A poor person is someone who has a mentality of poverty, never feels satisfied or content with what life has to offer.
Right.
So that's why we see African leaders, African politicians owning mansions, 5-6 mansions, stashing billions of dollars in banks in Switzerland. And one wonders, what are you going to do with all that? It's because they have this perpetual understanding of themselves as poor. Right. That no amount of money or real estate or property will satisfy. So a rich man will have 5 luxury cars parked, own 50 wristwatches and all of those things, and still feels poor mentally, right? So poverty is a state of mind. And this is what it creates. What creates that state of mind is when you imbibe that poverty narrative. Oh, I am poor, because you have been labeled poor from your childhood, or you went to a public school without funding, or you didn't wear shoes to school, and all of those things, instead of looking at what the humanity that defines us. This is a human being, and should be treated as such with respect. Why do we have to refer to the absence of material luxuries in defining the totality of a person? So that is what actually children like the Ghetto Kids get to imbibe. And I mean, I just hope not. I know, again, this is much generalized, but these children can grow up into adults who retain this poverty mentality, this mindset of poor. And when they find themselves in government positions, when they find themselves where there is access to funds, instead of thinking community and thinking, building and just working with what they have, I think, I need to take care of myself. I am poor. I am poor. I am poor. And that's just what keeps breeding corruption, keeps breeding, borrowing the way dependence on other countries in terms of finance to take care of our needs, even when we have so much in Africa. Yeah.
Okay, well, yeah, I think that's very insightful. And okay, so this will be the final question. Obviously, we've had a very profound discussion, I think, on this. But I was curious, and we were all curious on this side. So, what would your suggested rebranding for the Ghetto Kids be? Same exact context, these dance group children. I'm not sure of the entire history of the foundation of the group, but obviously they met through some community effort, found a manager, became internet savvy, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, that same exact trajectory straight to Britain's Got Talent. And then now they're introducing themselves to the world for the first time in front of Simon Cowell and I don't know who else is up there. So what would you like to see as this Ugandan kids dancing up there and they say, we are the...
So many names come to mind, but I think of Swahili.
Let's hear them.
I think of Swahili language as the language that Africa is trying to unite around, right?
Right.
So that the platform would have been such a great opportunity for the kids to say, we are. What's courage in Swahili now?
Oh, don't put me on the spot. Ujasiri.
Ujasiri.
Yeah.
Ujasiri kids from Uganda. And Ujasiri, what does that mean? That would be the first question that one of the judges will ask. Ujasiri is a Swahili word that means courage. We are courageous in the face of, we are here, we've made it here, we are just, and you can imagine, and Swahili, by the way, is the most widely spoken language in Africa. And someone somewhere say, really, Swahili? That sounds like a great, that's a great name. I would like to learn Swahili. And this is someone who has never heard of the word Swahili. And we begin to project this language.
I think my interpretation of what you just said is that something that furthers an understanding instead of taking people back. Because if you introduce yourself Ghetto Kids, it's like, I know ghetto. So you look back. But if you mention something new, like Ujasiri or some other word, you take that understanding a bit further. I honestly, when I was thinking of that question, I was just drawing a blank completely. I'm like, well, I don't know what I would name these kids. But here, so let's see. Let's see another name that you might have, because we could try emailing them.
Oh, okay. Another name, maybe if they are just maybe Sunshine. Sunshine in Swahili or Luganda. I know that's is Kiganda or Luganda.
Yeah.
The language in the Ugandan, most popular language in Uganda, if they choose that. But sometimes, they might be from different ethnic groups in Uganda. And if that's an issue, like it is in some countries in Africa, then they may want to adopt a Swahili name in order to, bring more unity in that. So it could be a sunshine, a Swahili name for sunshine. I mean, they're so young and so bright.
Mwanga wa jua? Yeah, some Mwanga wa jua.
Okay, something of that nature, maybe
Yeah,
something short.
yeah,
You
something
know,
along those lines. Yeah.
they're just sunshine. You just see them and you smile, and they bring light and life and so much brightness, and that was the beautiful name for them. Which is just, or even happiness. You know the song they used to introduce them in America, happiness.
Yeah.
All the time. I mean, they can use a Swahili word for happiness. You know, Swahili sounds so
I think
beautiful.
that would have been a great furaha. Furaha. That would have been that would have been a great name for them actually. Happiness, like, furaha. Because then they'll be like, oh, what does that mean? Oh, it means happiness. Yeah. Yeah, I take your point there. Yeah, but thank you very much, Dr. Chika Esiobu. I hope I'm not keeping you too late there. And thank you for your patience over the
Thank
past couple
you.
of days.
Thank you for, the interview. It was great just getting to interact around the topic of the Ghetto Kids and their
Yeah,
name.
certainly. I've certainly learned quite a bit, and I was sure I would like to discuss, a lot more in the future, like your TED Talk, for instance, your short stories, your fiction. I haven't read any of them yet. Do you write like African fantasies of sorts,
I
or is it
wrote
or is it
a
like realistic type of stories? I'm curious.
I think it just depends on what comes. It's like just comes, and I think the last one I wrote that was published is about Patrice Lumumba's tooth.
Oh,
It's horror. I don't think you
yeah,
want to read that.
yeah, that sounds very specific.
So it's called the Prophet's Tooth.
The Prophets too. So where can people read some of your works? Where should they go?
I have a blog. It's chikaforafrica.com.
Okay.
ChikaForAfrica, chikaforafrica.com. I have a few of my articles out there, but of course, Pan-African Review publishes quite a few, and the short stories are published in other short story specific platforms.
Okay, and that's and on your website you can find pretty much everything, right? Or is
Not everything, but quite a few. You can
yeah.
start from there, and I update it from time to time. So yeah.
Yeah, and what's your website for anyone who's curious? Is that the same blog?
It's the same blog, yes,
Okay.
chikaforafrica.com. It's the website, but I just call it a blog because it's just all articles and some
Yeah.
media.
Yeah, it's truly fascinating stuff. And once more, thank you very much. And hopefully in the near future, we can have you back and we can carry on this discussion.
Okay, Mahatma. I look forward to chatting more in the future.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Thank
Have a
you.
good night.
You too. Bye.
Cheers. Thank you very much for sticking with us till the end. Be sure to check out our website at panafricanreview.com, and we will see you guys in the next episode.